rid of his sin. The only way a man can get rid of this nasty, dirty thing that keeps me separated from God is to be washed in the blood of Christ. In Matthew chapter 26 and beginning at verse number 27, Jesus says something here concerning his blood. In Matthew chapter 26 and verse number 27, the Bible says he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, drink ye all of it, for this is the blood of the New Testament, which is shed for many for the remission or for the removal of sins. Colossians chapter 1 and beginning at verse number 12. Colossians chapter 1 and beginning at verse number 12, notice here what the Bible tells us about the blood. Colossians chapter 1 and beginning at verse number 12, the Bible says, giving thanks unto the Father, which hath made us meet or suitable to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in light, who have delivered us from the power of darkness, and hath translated us to the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins. And that's the only way that a man can have his sins removed. The only thing that has the power to get rid of a man's sins is the blood. And so what we're looking at when it comes to the salvation of mankind, God decided that blood had to be used in the plan. Salvation is God's business. And God decided that the only power to remove death because of sin is the blood. But not only the blood. When you look at the Bible, you see that there is another element that God used in salvation, and that is water. God used water in the saving of man as well. Back in Noah's day, God decided that the world had become so corrupt that it needed purifying. And the way he was going to do it was to bring a flood of waters upon the earth. Genesis chapter 6 and verse number 5 explains to us just how bad things had gotten in the earth. Genesis chapter 6 and verse number 5, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Drop down to verse number 17. Bible says, and behold, I do bring a flood of waters on the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. From under heaven, everything that is in the earth shall die. And so God was going to use waters from the flood to destroy evil mankind and thus purify the earth. But the Bible informs us that the same waters that God used to destroy a wicked man are the same waters that God used to save Noah and his family. The Bible says in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse number 20 that they were sometime disobedient when once long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while that ark was being prepared, wherein few, that is 8 souls, he says, was saved by water. And the like figure, just like God was saving by water back then, he's saying God is still saving by water today. Amen. Even baptism does also now save us. It's not the putting away of the filth of the flesh. You're not just washing dirt from your body, but you are being obedient unto the command of God. Amen. Which is why he says it's the answer of a good conscience toward God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. From the beginning, God has always used water in saving his people. When you look at Exodus chapter 14 and you see God delivering his people from Egyptian bondage, when they ran upon the Red Sea, beginning at verse number 21, God tells Moses to stretch his hand out over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. When you drop back down to verse number 29, the Bible says, but the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on the left. Verse 30 says, thus the Lord saved Israel that day. When did God save Israel? When did God look upon them as being saved? It was after they had passed through the water. After they had gone through the Red Sea on dry land. The Bible indicates unto us in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse number 1 and 2 that them passing through those waters was a type of baptism. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and beginning at verse number 1, Bible tells us, moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all of our fathers, under the cloud, all passed through the sea. The Bible says, when they passed through the sea, verse number 2, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. Them being passed through those waters on dry land, the Bible says was a type of baptism. And the Bible says they were saved that day. What day were they saved? They were saved the day that they passed through those waters. And the Bible says that that was a type of them being baptized unto Moses in those waters. Oh yes, my friends. Salvation is God's business. And God decided that blood and water is always meant to be used in his plan. We see that with Jesus as he's hanging on the cross in John chapter 19 and beginning at verse number 30. In John chapter 19 and beginning at verse number 30, the Bible says, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished, and bowed his head and gave up the ghost. The Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for the Sabbath day was a high day, they besought Pilate that their legs might be broken, that they might be taken away. The Bible says, then came the soldiers and brake the legs of the first and of the other, which was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, the Bible says they brake not his legs, but one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. Not only there, but in 1 John chapter 5, in 1 John chapter 5, beginning at verse number 4, watch what John says in 1 John chapter 5 and beginning at verse number 4. Listen what the Apostle John has to say. The Bible says, for whosoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. John asked a question, who is he that overcometh the world? But he that believeth that Jesus is the Son of God. And then John says, this is he that came by water and blood. You got some folk out here teaching that all you got to do is just believe in your heart. But when you look at what John is saying here, John says that the one who overcomes the world is the one that believes, but he doesn't stop at believing. The one who believes is the same one that came by water and blood. He said, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that bears witness, because the Spirit is truth. And so what we are seeing here is that from the beginning, God has always used blood and water. And that's the way it is today. If a man is going to be saved, he's got to come in contact with the blood. And the only way to come in contact with the blood is to be baptized in some water. Let me explain that to you just a little bit further. So you need to understand that since salvation is God's business, then God has determined exactly